Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today. I'd like to begin by welcoming my panelists and thanking them for joining me in today's very relevant discussion on the question of whether it is time for a green recovery. Our panelists come from some of the most significant companies in Colombia and undoubtedly have many interesting and valuable perspectives to share with us today. Quickly to introduce them, we have with us Camilo Abello from Grupo Argos, the largest cement company in Colombia, an energy company, an infrastructure company, and a real estate company. We have Alejandro Sánchez from Cofico Colombiana, also a holding company with investments in agro-industry, hotels, infrastructure, and energy. And last, we have Guillermo Gonzalez from ISA, an energy company with the largest transmission grids in Colombia and Peru, as well as infrastructure business line, telecommunications, and management of the electricity exchange. Before I turn over to my panelists, I'd like to just reflect briefly on where we are, the situation we find ourselves in. I find myself somewhat skeptical of anyone who suggests that they know what our post-COVID world is going to look like. But I think there are three things that we can be sure of, which are relevant to our discussion today. The first is that the economic impact of this pandemic will be severe, perhaps more severe than any of us have experienced in our lifetimes. Despite the extraordinary measures taken by governments, NGOs, individuals, and civil society at large, the fallout will be significant. The OECD estimates that under some scenarios, we will see a global GDP decline of more than 7%. The speed of the recovery is uncertain and unfortunately driven by factors outside of our control. The second thing we can be sure of is that during this crisis, firms with better ESG performance have outperformed their counterparts. This is demonstrated in relative market outperformance as well as lower volatility. But this actually extends beyond the crisis. A recent Morningstar study looking at back over 3, 5, and 10 years found that in general, ESG funds performed better than the alternative and tended to survive longer than other funds. And the third thing we can be sure of is that this crisis presents us not just with enormous risk, but also literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, recently promised to put the European Green Deal at the center of the EU's recovery plan. Specifically, she said, by using the European Green Deal as our compass, we can turn the crisis of this pandemic into an opportunity to rebuild our economies differently and to make them more resilient. So this leads us nicely into our discussion today, and I'd like to begin by asking my panelists what impact, if any, the last few months have had on their thinking about their business. How have you responded in the short term? What are some of the immediate things you've done? As well as how has it reshaped your thinking about the future and the role of business in society? Alejandro, let me begin with you.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Shaban, for the panel. Let me talk a little bit briefly about the question. Well, in our case, most of our businesses sit at the backbone of the economy. What we do, as you mentioned before, is infrastructure, transportation, natural gas distribution, services that in general provide a network for the economic activity and the livelihoods of millions of people. The companies we invest in are present in most of the regions in Colombia and are very important for the rural economy. So situations like this one that we're living right now, market disruptions such as the one, are rare, but are times that represent an enormous challenge for businesses, the businesses that we have. But they also are an opportunity to realize the full impact of the footprint that our company has in the economy. So what we have done, and this situation is interesting because it was so sudden and forceful that it brought us to take serious decisions and to test our moral and corporate compass in the sense of deciding what was important. And in our case, the first and foremost was to safeguard our communities, the health of our employees, our families, customers, suppliers, and all the regions we operate. So that was our first goal, and it still is to safeguard our communities. On the second place is just to manage the service continuity. As I mentioned before, what we do is central to most industries, to industries, to commerce, to agriculture. So a responsibility that we have to the country and to the economy is to continue our service and to provide the network of energy and transportation, even in the restrictions that we face right now. So that was the second measure that we tried to pursue. On third place, this is more of a corporate part, but we wanted to maintain liquidity in all of our businesses. Part of the sustainability is to make sure that you can operate in the long term, and for that you have to make sure that you are able to meet your commitments. So liquidity was important. But what is important in these three aspects that I just mentioned is that the short answer to your question is yes, we realized in this situation that we have an important impact, and we have reviewed our priorities, and we have set forward the main priority, which is the people in our communities, and that's very important in business decisions. So that's one of the key messages that we have so far got from this crisis. On the other side, on the business side, we invest in sectors that generally are considered important, sectors that are regulated, stable, long-term oriented. We don't have investments in market trends or in highly technological businesses with large returns. But situations like these really are a test to the investment thesis that we have had for a long time, and we are reaffirmed on the idea that we prefer to be sustainable in the long run rather than be fast growing and volatile. So the short answer to your question is yes, we have realized that we have a deep impact. We have put people first, and we have reaffirmed our business model. And in that sense, this situation is an important one, and it will be in the coming discussions for the future of our company.
Fantastic. That all of you. And what's interesting to me is the sort of immediate short-term focus on preserving the health and well-being of employees, customers, contributing in whatever way people can in that regard, but then also using this as an opportunity to think, well, what does this mean for our organization and the role our organization plays going forward? And linking that back to value creation within the firm, because it's obviously critically important that these things are tied together, that one doesn't think of sustainability as being divorced from how the firm operates as a profitable entity over the longer term. So perhaps that leads us then into the next question, which is, so we're going through this pandemic. We're having to manage the immediate effects of the pandemic, which is sort of questions of resilience, questions of ensuring the health and safety of the people who are working there, but also new realizations about perhaps a different perspective on the world and the role of the company within that world. Are there specific things? Well, firstly, do you agree with the proposition that we should use this moment to move to a green recovery? And if so, are there specific things that you're already thinking about or planning on doing that might support a green recovery, whether that's investing more in renewable energies, more resilient infrastructure, any other examples you might have? Alejandro, let me turn to you here and ask you a similar question. Is this the moment for a green recovery? And if so, what are you specifically looking at in order to support this?
Sure. Of course, I support Guillermo's position, and I think the situation that we're living right now is a clear driver of change. I would say, following your question, even more than green recovery, I would consider that a sustainable recovery, in the sense that we are learning in very difficult steps that what is good for the world is good for us, and what is good for our neighbor is good for us as well. And we've heard this all over the news, but the whole restraint, the whole lockdown is a proof that by taking care of each other, we're actually taking care of us. And that's a metaphor that is adaptable as well to the corporate environment. What we have seen is that we operate in communities. We operate in several regions. We operate in regions where there is almost no government presence. So those communities where we work are actually our life, and we depend on them, and they depend on us. So we have this relationship where we really have been shown that we are just one single community, business community, and the people where we work. So I fully support the idea that this crisis is the driver for change, for a more sustainable business development. What we are doing and what we are realizing in this pandemic is that it is not two different parties of an equation. It is just one large body, the business and the communities where they operate. We are starting to develop new ties with the communities, as well as was mentioned before by Camilo. One of our main goals has been to preserve employment and to preserve the livelihoods of people, and we have been shown that that turns back in a positive way to us. So we are committed to development of those communities where we work in. We're committed to education. We have had plans to foster education in the communities where we operate, but we are strengthening that. We have also an important commitment to environment in some of the regions, and it's worthwhile to mention that some of our operations are agribusiness that sit in the really far out places in Colombia, where we are the only means to survive and to provide their support to those communities. So we have this symbiotic relationship with them, and we're going to keep strengthening that and really provide for a better ties with community. Regarding some more corporate initiatives, of course, we're committing to developing these reporting standards to see how that develops over time. We started to do that some years ago, but we're keep on improving that. And one of the main goals that we have right now is to make this sustainable concept that also includes the green that you mentioned, part of our DNA, part of the core values that we carry where we go and that we evaluate in every single investment that we pursue in the future. So yes, I think it is time to make a change, to use this crisis as an opportunity for more sustainable businesses. And the main driver is that the deep impact that this crisis is having in companies is going to make it have a deep imprint in the corporate DNA that we have.
Fantastic. And I mean, I like this idea that one has to sort of start to internalize these issues and think about what do these mean for our business conduct, business practices, how we actually do business, and also use it as a way of identifying where the opportunities are, because I think that's the other side of it. There are genuine opportunities associated with this new direction. But just to carry on, so as I mentioned at the outset, in other parts of the world, we've seen very strong calls on government to build back better, to build back greener, to say emphatically, we don't want to go back to what we had before. This is a real chance to do something different. And in some places, we've seen businesses asking government to do this specifically, or government coming out and saying this themselves. So I guess my question to each of you is, do you see a need for a similar type of approach in Colombia? Is there an ask that you would have of government to support a green recovery? Or is there a challenge you put out to other companies like yourselves in terms of getting part of this? How do you sort of see this moving forward? And Alejandro, let me turn to you. What are you going to challenge your fellow companies to do, or encourage government to do to support this green recovery?
Well, I think aside from the good intentions that everyone has, we have to understand each company's place in the business landscape and what we can do to improve sustainability. As the other important companies represented here, we, Coffee Colombiana, we are an important investment company. We invest a lot of money every year in different initiatives. So one of the things that we did recently was to sign our investment declaration, where we make a public commitment to include ESG factors in every investment decision that we make. And I think through publicizing this and then making this a public statement, we send a message to every possible venture and project that we care for environment, that we not only care, but we're going to evaluate it and take it into account in our business decisions. So I think we have the responsibility to start shaping the business decisions and include environmental and social criteria amongst our decision variables. Also, I'm familiar coming on the green bonds. We're fostering the issues of our carbon reduction bonds, and we've done that in some of our agribusiness deals, and that's been a very profitable side of the business while also contributing to the better plan. So that is something that we are also very keen to explore and to enhance every initiative that we can, in green or carbon reduction bonds. That is something that we're strongly targeting. As well as was mentioned by Camilo, we're also committing to the preservation of natural environments aside from what we're mandated to. I think that's part of our responsibility. On the social front, I think it's very important to realize that we all work within communities, and communities in a country such as Colombia are very underprivileged. So there is always been a tension between business and communities that hasn't been always resolved in the best of ways. Part of our commitment and what we should do is to be better in that and to provide for better solutions and relationships between companies and the communities where they work on. If I would ask something from the government, it's also to keep on pushing for greener technologies. We have some initiatives and we have tax incentives and things that are a good idea to promote greener technologies, but I think we could do better in that. We could provide for better incentives and try to bring more investment as it has been in other countries and in other moments in time. So I think we can do better on the business side. We have to commit ourselves and we have to do it publicly. We have to provide for people to understand that this is not just a fashion or something out of our just what we do in our spare time, but also to get that same wood from the government saying we need you to do this in a greener way, in a more sustainable way. We need you to have a better relationship with the communities. We need to have this relationship working as a partner relationship between environment, communities, and companies. And that is something that we are actively pursuing in all of the business that we develop, not only in the infra business, but also in the agribusiness and even in the energy business.
Having to unmute myself. Thank you for that. So as we think about this, I haven't seen any questions come in, which could be a failure on my part to navigate the technology, but I'm having fun talking to you, so I'm just going to keep going, and the audience can hopefully still reach us with questions if they have them. As we move to a more sophisticated understanding, away from sort of notions of corporate social responsibility into genuinely internalizing issues of sustainability into the business and business operations and business thinking, one of the challenges that we have to think about as corporates is how do we communicate that? How do we communicate that out to the various stakeholders who are interested in what it is that we're doing? And as we know, there are sort of a range of different reporting frameworks and standards, like, for example, GRI and SASB, as well as rankings and raters like the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. So how do you, Alejandro, think about best communicating what you do and navigating this variety of reporting frameworks, standards, rankings, ratings, etc.?
You're right. I think it is a challenge. We have these different reporting standards. We're in the process of not only giving importance to sustainability, but also trying to comply with different ideas of reporting. We actually started to do that for the past 3 years. We've been reporting in GRI. We recently studied as well with Dow Jones. In some cases, they meet the criteria, in some others don't. So you're right in the sense that it would be beneficial to have a clear standard for everyone to follow and to comply. So that's one desirable that we should get at some point. Right now, a company such as ours is trying to follow the rules in every, at least 2 or 3 different reporting standards. That is something that we're working on, and I think that has to be improved at a market level. It's not just a single company that can do something about that. To enhance that and to try to fill in some of the gaps that we feel are there, is exactly what I mentioned before, the public declaration that we signed, saying we're not only just going to comply with some standards and provide some additional reporting, but we are going to do a public statement on what we think is important and in what particular way sustainability impacts our business, and we think we can make a change. And again, in our view, a company that makes investments has to have an investment policy that really accounts and commits to ESG, as well as IRR or any financial metric that you consider. We have to consider ESG metrics, and that's the way we're considering. So ideally, if we could get to some place where we have one single standard, would be better. But while we get there, I think we have to do our own work and do some public standards on what we do internally.
Wonderful. So we are at time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'd just like to reflect. I mean, I think one of the things that we've all, that certainly all of us on this call or this the seminar panel realize is that, you know, this COVID pandemic, as terrible as it has really been, in some senses, kind of a test run for the big one, right? Which is climate change, and which is coming, and we know is going to be, the impacts are going to be significant unless we start moving much faster and doing much more than we've been doing up until now. And I think the other thing it's highlighted, somebody made the point about, you know, looking forward, getting better at looking at the trends of what's coming. One of the things I've been seeing increasingly is investors are increasingly focused not just on individual ESG issues, but on systemic issues. What are the things that are not within the domain of a single company, but that emerge as a result of the interaction of the behavior of a series of companies? And I think this is the next big area that people are going to be concerned about. Climate change is the big systemic externality. We've mentioned biodiversity loss as another one, inequality, racial inequality, as we've seen coming on the back of the George Floyd events, and then the George Floyd murder, and then the protests around the world. So all of these are issues, I think, that increasingly people are trying to grapple with, and we're getting more sophisticated tools that allow us to assess them better. And I think, you know, it's heartening to see that large companies that have such large impact are thinking seriously about how we grapple with this as we go forward. So ordinarily, I would look out into the audience and ask everyone to thank me for having such a fantastic set of panelists. I can't do that, so please take my warmest gratitude for your time today, for participating in today's session. I'd also like to thank our hosts for having us here today and giving us this opportunity to have this conversation. And I wish you all a wonderful and productive rest of your day. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Owen. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.